Hey guys, so making a video here today that I think we all wish didn't have to be made. I just kind of wanted to put it out there for anybody who hasn't seen yet that John Meadows recently suffered a heart attack. For those of you who have watched my channel before, John has been on a couple of times. He was actually just on recently and within the last month. And the reason I wanted to also make this video is, we had a clip in there that I am going to include at the end of this video, basically talking about heart health and, just health in general and his health. And I just wanted to kind of like put that out there because I do think it's relevant. I think it's, one more thing for people to consider when they consider, the bodybuilding lifestyle and everything. And I really hope that people can take this video as just informative and, trying to be as respectful as possible because I really like John. Like I said, we've only talked a couple times, but when we've talked either offline or, on the podcast, he's seemed like a really great guy. He seems like a good family man. I know he's got a pretty young son that he's always hanging out with, and he just seems like a good guy. And even just for the community, everybody in the bodybuilding community likes this guy, has good things to say about him. So hopefully he has a speedy recovery. I haven't seen too much information on it so far. I only know that he had the heart attack, and obviously it's unfortunate. So I just kind of want to talk on some points regarding that. And at the end of this video, I'm going to post a clip where basically, we talk about his heart health, recent heart scans, and all that. So, like I said, first thing, I just want to make sure everybody's still respectful. I don't want to see anybody like hating on him for like, because of his previous steroid use or anything like that. So, if you watch the clip, you'll see that John recently talked about having a heart scan done. And this is something you see all the time. And even worse, actually, with people thinking that their blood work shows everything, and John was astute enough to point out that blood work isn't going to show you everything. And that's a very good point. People, they'll do a cycle and sometimes they'll get the blood work done when they're not on the cycle and they think everything's fine. And it's like, man, like the damage is being done while you're on cycle. That's when you should be getting some tests done to see what's happening. But even then, you don't know necessarily how prone you are to certain things happening. Blood work is not going to show you that you have concentric hypertrophy, the thickening of your heart walls. It's not going to show you that you have eccentric hypertrophy, okay, when your walls are dilated. It's not going to show that you have mitral valve prolapse. It's not going to show a lot of different things until it's too late. So blood work alone is really, I think, not enough for anybody who decides to go down that route. But even getting these scans, John showed that he had had a calcium score done, and for the most part, it was good. And his doctor told him he was great. Now, keep in mind that plenty of people who don't ever use any sort of drugs at all have heart attacks, right? The majority of heart attacks are certainly not in performance enhancing drug users. And so I'm not trying to like put a blame on something, but obviously there is a risk when you go down that route. So it's just something to keep in mind that you can have all the scans in the world and you can have great doctors, but you don't ever truly know. We don't have the answers for everything in medicine yet. So you want to put the odds in your favor. But John had mentioned that his echoes were great. That's what the doctors had said. And I don't think there's that much more John could have done given the lifestyle. This is definitely in no way like a video like, oh, if he just did this or this, not at all. Like I think John, anybody who knows John or has talked to John knows that he has preached being as healthy as possible, from the start pretty much. I mean, he had T Nation articles back over a decade ago talking about being as healthy as possible doing this. But of course, if you are competing at heavy weights, if you're competing for decades, if you're 100 pounds or 50 pounds heavier than your body naturally would be at, that is going to cause a stress on your body. And, as much as you can have the grass-fed beef and, do your cardio in the morning and take your fish oil and all that stuff, that's great. But that is not going to undo potential damage from decades of steroid use and potentially diuretic use and growth hormone use and all of that. So I just kind of wanted to put this out there, I get questions all the time of people saying, oh, like, you seem to know about this. Why did you even consider it in the past? Or, I'm considering it. What do you think? And for the most part, I almost tell everybody not to do it because I think for most people, it's not worth it. And this is just one more video that I would probably put in that area where I'd say, look, like, it's obviously a personal choice. I think as long as you understand what you're doing, it's a reasonable decision. Again, in the sense that I think kind of a libertarian in that regard. I think it's your body. You can do what you want. but you do have to understand their consequences. And maybe John or anybody else who's had a heart attack while having used gear in the past, maybe they would have had one anyway. That's certainly possible. But it is a scary thing when something like this happens. He mentioned Dallas McCarver, who died. Obviously, he was using a ton of gear. Richard Piana died in the same year. Obviously, he was using a ton of gear. But I don't think John was. I think John was probably using moderate doses. So anyway, guys, I just wanted to put this out there. Again, any comments, I really hope people can be respectful. Again, I think John is a really good guy, and I really hope that he has a speedy recovery from this. And then I'm going to play the clip here.
So let me ask, now that you've competed for decades, you're very experienced in kind of all realms of bodybuilding. Now you've backed off to HRT, which I don't know if you tell anybody your protocol. I imagine
it's real simple. It's a shot of cypionate every Saturday. It's 200 mgs every Saturday. Yeah.
And no growth hormone or anything with it?
I was taking growth hormone for about a year and a half at like 2-3 IUs, but I haven't taken any now for probably a year.
Okay. So do you believe that, I think most people, they'll argue about the health detriments of PEDs, right? And obviously different ones can have different issues. I would imagine that with the amount and like the span of time that you use, there's some, maybe some people would argue, hey, I was going to be 90, now I'm going to be 85. Other people would argue, man, you just took 20 years off. Unfortunately, there's no way to know, right? If somebody gets a heart attack, they might take 40 years off that they weren't otherwise. I do know a guy who he had a clotting disorder. And so he had a heart attack, pretty massive heart attack when he was like 40. And he probably did take 30 plus years off his life. And then you have other people who will be 80 plus. So obviously there's always the risk. I was just curious for you. Obviously you're an intelligent guy. I'm sure you weighed the costs and benefits there. At this point, how do you feel moving forward with your health? Do you think that there's a good chance you'll live a healthy life the rest of your time, or do you think you've done some significant damage?
Well, that's a very fair question, first of all, because you're right. I've been in this a long time. When Dallas McCarver died, I think it sent shockwaves through the community. And the first thing that happened when he died, I remember what I thought. I remember thinking, I may not have been taken as much as Dallas, but I've been in this a long time. So I got really scared.
Yeah.
Blood work only shows you so much.
Right.
So I wanted to see specifically what my heart was like. So I went and got a calcium score test. So they can look at the calcification in your arteries. Your HDL can tell you one thing in blood work, but all the medical stuff. So if your HDL is low, you have a higher probability of this, that, blah, blah, blah. Well, I wanted to see, forget the blood work. I want a scan of my heart. I want to see. So I got a calcium score test done. You get this thing called an Ejection score, and they test 3 of the main arteries in your heart. 2 of mine were clear, and one of them scored, I want to say it was an 18. So I went to my doctor and then to another cardiologist. And I looked up how to interpret it myself, but I want to know what they thought. And they're both like, "You're great. You're awesome. You're good. You're very healthy for your age." And Dr. Serrano, of course, has worked with me since I was 27 years old.
Wow.
So he was he was happy. He was like, "See, So for me, you just don't know. But I think the things that are really dangerous, I think the diuretics is one that people got to be really careful with. In particular, the electrolyte imbalances that occur, but then people go crazy on their diet right afterwards. And what we've seen the last couple of years is there's been some people who died a couple of days after the show.
Yeah.
And that's a dangerous one. And I remember those days. I remember competing at a certain weight, and then Wednesday, the following week, being 25 pounds heavier and feeling terrible, getting nosebleeds. That's not good. That's a bad thing.
Yeah, sure.
But the way I do it now with no diuretics, I could literally wake up Sunday and go train. It's just like you wake up, it's a normal day.
Right.
As long as you hydrate after the show's over the night before. So for me, I don't know, man. I don't know if I've taken years off my life. I don't know. All I can do is get my blood work done. I try to get the best tests that are the most revealing done. echoes and things like that for my heart. And I've got left ventricular hypertrophy just like every other athlete that's
Dude.
out there. I've got a little bit of that, but so does everybody else that runs or exercises. My liver enzymes are they're actually amazing. My AST and ALT never change.
That's great.
Like it used to freak Serrano out. I'd come back after a show and I would get it tested right then because that's when I figured it'd be the worst, the most stressed.
Right. Right.
And my AST and ALT would be right in the range.
Really? Wow.
So I have like an iron liver.
Yeah, apparently. Wow.
What I worry about for me personally is my kidneys, and the reason why is because if you know my history, I had my colon removed from a rare disease I had in 2005.
Yep.
And it makes me prone to dehydration. And if you're dehydrated over and over and over, it's very stressful on your kidneys. So that's what I really pay attention to. I pay attention to my blood urea nitrogen, my BUN, my creatinine, my ejection fraction, like cytostatin. Like I watch all that stuff. That's the thing that I'm really kind of honed in on because I'm so prone to getting dehydrated now.
That's it's kind of amazing that your liver enzymes stayed so optimal. I had a story on one of my more recent podcasts where, being a dumb college student, I'd experimented with some of the, at the time, like legal pro-hormone things. And short, 25 days, I think, dramatic changes that, of course, were all lost right afterwards. But my liver enzymes were literally like 6 to 8 times above the normal limit.
Probably 300, something like that.
Like 600 to 900.
Yeah, that's pro hormones. But people don't realize how some of those pro hormones will absolutely destroy your liver.
Yeah, it was not good.
I mean, there's a lot of guys that made a lot of money selling them.
Yeah.
They're still running companies today.
I was, I think, 21, and like basically, my friend who I had been bigger than since I knew him, all of a sudden just like that blew up, and I was like, what the hell is going on here? So that was one of the few times where like I'm very rational in most of my decision making. I'm risk averse, and I usually do a lot of research, and that was one of the few times I didn't, which I regret. But yeah, it was crazy to see that. But I think it's good that you said like you get the blood work done, because I know people who say, well, I get blood work done off cycle, I'm not even going to bother on cycle because of course it's going to be bad, which I understand, but it's like, wouldn't you want to know how bad it's getting? Like, why would you want to just turn a blind eye to that?
Well, what guys do is they will crank gear for 9 months, and then they'll go off of it, and they'll get tested 6 weeks later, and things are starting to normalize, and they'll go, okay, see, I'm good. Then they'll go back on. I'm like,
yeah, right.
Wait a minute, you're 9 months. Yeah, I mean that's what happens. And for me, I always wanted to get it in the off season, but I also got it right in show prep. I wanted to see how bad things actually were.
Yeah, no, I think that's wise. Just curious, do you happen to know what your recent ejection fractions have been?
Well, they're right around 70, but it depends on what formula you use. There's the formula that's out there now, the most labs use is kind of outdated. It doesn't take into account size.
Mm-hmm.
So if you use kind of the more updated formula, mine's actually around more like 80 or 90.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That seems very high. Wow. Yeah, with my, so I was never like a super athlete in terms of like doing tons of cardio or anything. But for people who don't know, like typical ejection fraction ranges, they say, are 55 to 70%. And so for me, I was I was always doing more weightlifting than I was cardio. The cardio was just, because I was supposed to do it kind of a thing. But I had enough dilation. So I never had any ventricular hypertrophy like you experience, like a lot of people who do heavy lifting for years experience. But I had a dilation. And there was always some discussion as was this pathological or physiological? And we weren't really sure. And it wasn't to like an extreme extent, but it was basically like the dilation you'd see in an endurance cyclist or something like that. Okay. While not being somebody who actually does any sort of endurance. So things that for me, that's probably the main reason I never really went down the, because when you talk about like Bill Lewin's book and all that, like I had read the whole thing. It was a subject that I was very interested in. And then once I found that out about my heart, it was just like, it's just, I was scared to do anything, even if it would have been, fine. Like I said, I'm kind of risk averse in that regard. But I still, like you, I wanted to get checked. I wanted to make sure how things were. And it is kind of crazy how many people just dive in without any baseline, and then they do it for years and they don't have any idea what's happening. But I think that's just kind of the culture.
You know what? Something just occurred to me. This is going to probably freak some of your readers out. When I gave you those numbers, I was talking about glomerular filtration rate, GFR, not heart.
Okay.
I was talking about kidneys.
Okay.
So
I was saying, yeah, because I was like, that seems very, very high.
yeah, no, my fault. As you were talking, I thought, oh, I missaid that. I didn't say the right terminology.
Okay. Do you have any idea what yours are for the ejection fraction, or?
No, I don't. I don't.
I'm sure they would have told you if they weren't normal, but.
Yeah, that's not ringing any bells at all, honestly.
Okay, no worries. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure if you've had echoes done, they'd be telling you if anything was off. So.
Yeah, yeah. There was never any concern with the echoes. I know that. So
that's great.
But the GFR, like that kidney stuff, man, that's what I really try to keep a close eye on, and blood pressure, which is tied to your kidneys as well.
Right, for sure. Yeah, and I mean, I think people look at you in the industry as kind of like the guy who's done the best and promoted the most health with this. I don't think you're obviously not shy about admitting, what you've like done or taken. You're open about what the sport is, but I always people say, it's like, well, John Meadows blank, when it comes to, protocols for staying healthy. And, if you have this passion and you want to go after your passion of bodybuilding, at least do it in the healthiest way. And I think that's a great way to promote it because, everything's a choice in life, but at least you can be as informed as possible.
Yeah. And that's how I look at it. I don't look down on people for their choices, but let's just try to do it intelligently, because there's a lot of, not so much I don't know, my YouTube would beg to differ with me, but there used to be a lot of, the natural versus enhanced kind of factions. And one of the things I'm trying to do with my YouTube channel is on the videos, you'll notice I'll say, I might tweak this way for a natural, and I might tweak it this way for someone who's enhanced. I don't look down on either one of those groups. Yeah. I love bodybuilding. We're in it together. Let's get everybody to their goals. Let's just do it intelligently, So that's how I look at it. I've always had great friends in the natural community, and I value tremendously the natural coaches because they're the ones who have to actually think.
Yeah.
Right. The coaches in the enhanced community can just throw drugs at stuff. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're not losing fat? I'll just increase your T3. So I've always had a great relationship with the guys that coach in the natural side of the sport because I know they have to solve problems. They have to really think. And that's why I continue to work with a lot of natural people. People sometimes only see my IFBB competitors, but the large majority of the people I work with, they're natural.
Yeah.
And they're not top IFBB competitors.
Right. Sure.